the top somehow. I'll keep moving on. I won't stop now. I'll keep moving on till I reach the top somehow. I'll keep moving on. I won't stop now. I'll keep moving on till I reach the top somehow. I'll keep moving on.
Yes, my Straight Talk family, it's that time when I say good night to the entire Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and I say good night to the entire Caribbean region, as it's that time when we introduce your program, Straight Talk, that comes to you every Monday and Thursday night. And we reach you all around the world. And in particular, we target our Kittitian and Nevian diaspora. And I know that some of you are in Africa. There are some of you in Europe. There are some of you in Asia. And there are a whole lot of you all over North America. So I'm at liberty to say good night. I can say good morning, and I can also say good afternoon, because one of such greetings will be applicable to the region in which you now find yourselves. And my Straight Talk family, if you are joining me for the first time, just to inform you that Straight Talk is a public service program that facilitates and promotes free expression on all issues of national interest, be they legal, be they environmental, be they technological, social, economic, and or political issues. On Straight Talk, we do have a forum to express yourselves freely. Let's, in the process, continue to keep St. Kitts and Nevis as one of the freest countries in the entire world. On this program, we try to raise the level of national consciousness. We try to raise the level of national discourse by alerting our people to their rights, to their responsibilities, and certainly to their obligations. My name is Ian Patches Liburd, and I give Almighty God thanks for blessing me with yet another opportunity to join you in conversation on yet another occasion. And we are missing again a population, or our radio population for now, and we'll get those things all sorted out, because we are in a state of, we are evolving as we go along, a state of transformation. And as I said to you some nights ago, change is something we ought to expect. We ought to expect. Change is constant and change is unavoidable. And yes, we are now out of the throes of premature elections, and now it's time to settle down and deal with the serious business of governance. And I know that many people would like to continue that revolving door. Many people like to continue that revolving door. But in today's world, and with today's oversight, I should say, that won't happen. And as we change, as we evolve, I do have a brand new email as well for you, my Straight Talk family. That email address is Straight Talk Patches. That's StraighTalkPatches. That's one word. Use a lowercase. StraightTalkPatches@gmail.com. Remember that again. StraightTalkPatches@gmail.com. And just to also inform you, we are a participative program. By that I mean we include your calls and we include your emails. I'm a bit overwhelmed to take your messages on the Facebook Messenger and so on, but for now we deal with the email if possible and your telephone calls. If you are so minded to call, even though we don't have that ZIZ connection right now, you can still connect with the program at any time. Anytime you feel like connecting to the program, you just pick up your telephone and call 646-829-6672. That's 646-829-6672 and or 869-663-6672. I will entertain your calls at any time within the program from now on, instead of giving you a specific time to call. For now, as we evolve, as we transform things, we will entertain your calls at any time in the program. You feel free to call my Straight Talk family. Lots of things are happening. I've seen a lot of things going around on social media, but trust me, I am not going to engage, because I'm not one who likes to talk from a position of ignorance. I like to get all the facts on my Straight Talk family, and then we will be able to have a discussion. We'll be able to have a position on the basis of veracity. So, my Straight Talk family, I want to again welcome you to another edition of Straight Talk. And tonight we are going to look at, from here on, we're going to look at, as I said, the governance within the country. We're going to look at the public goods. And tonight I want to focus on a public good called water, because life without water on St. Kitts, that's my caption tonight. It's difficult, you know. As a matter of fact, life without water anywhere, it's terrible. In St. Kitts, Nevis, it's a situation that we are not accustomed to, and that commodity we just cannot live without.
Water is considered to be essential. We cannot live without water.
Yeah, and that was the former Minister with Public Infrastructure claiming, and rightly so, we cannot live without water. And we are having quite a lot of difficulties in St. Kitts with water. I know that the focus is on Kean, but I can tell you in Bird Rock and Frigate Bay, we are having quite a lot of difficulties without water, especially when it comes around this time. I remember jumping on the flight 6 o'clock one morning, arriving at my hometown St. Kitts at about just before 4 o'clock. I did not get home, so I went, as my grandmother would say, I went gallivanting. I went to see my friends Jasmine down there at the ferry dock. You know, I always go and see how are you, Jasmine, and Tasha Marley and the entire crew there at the ferry terminal. And Jasmine was once known for her famous pork. I recognize I don't still have any pork anymore. I never ate her pork. I always had Boy Blues pork nonetheless, but Boy Blues pork always had hair. But again, getting back to the topic though, life without water. And whether in St. Kitts or anywhere, life without water is difficult. And while Sean back then preached this philosophy about being able, or telling us we cannot live without water, in fact, he preached that philosophy, but he practiced otherwise. And I believe that Sean Richards would go down in history as the most heartless minister of utilities, who disconnected poor people, not just disconnected them, but disconnected them during the difficult times of our COVID-19 pandemic experience. Would you believe that?
But the fact is, that persons have been getting a service from government. The service comes at a cost. As a matter of fact, the cost of water in St. Kitts is cheaper than elsewhere throughout the region. Even in Nevis, water costs more. If the water goes off, persons complain, what happened to their supply of water?
And yes, imagine during COVID-19, people were without water. And we practice good sanitation. But how can we practice good sanitation without water? But water makes life. And every drop of water cycles continuously through air, land, and sea, to be used by someone or something else downstream. And water covers about 70% of the Earth's surface. 2/3 of the Earth's surface, I should say, is covered with water. In St. Kitts and Nevis, the entire country or entire federation of both islands are surrounded by water. Yet there is a scarcity of drinking water, or a scarcity of the drinkable water around us. Quite a lot has been said about the water in St. Kitts. And many things are right, but some things are dead wrong. You talk about Keon and lacking water, and St. Peter's and elsewhere. But what about Bird Rock? What about Frigate Bay and beyond that lacks water? The more things are repeated and go unchallenged though, the quicker some people tend to believe what is said. Take for example the Bastille Valley Aquifer and the misinformation that is being peddled by those who oppose, for example, the construction of the Bastille High School. The truth is, how do you separate the aquifer from the community? How do you do that, my Straight Dog family? Because as a matter of fact, the greater proportion of buildings in Bastille sits on the aquifer. I repeat that. The greater portion of buildings that populate Bastille sits on the aquifer. The point is though, the construction of the Bastille High School in the location identified will not, and I underline will not, in any way, shape or form negatively impact the water supply in East Bastille and for that matter, or by extension, in St. Kitts. But that is not my focus tonight. I consider water as a public good, and I submit that we must do everything in our power to conserve it so as to ensure its sustainability. And let us look at water in its totality. Where does our drinking water in St. Kitts comes from? That's a question we may ask. Now, in most cases, drinking water comes from two sources: surface water or groundwater. And in St. Kitts, those are the facts. My focus again is on St. Kitts because I do not have and I have not studied the situation, don't have the information I should say, neither have I studied the situation on our sister island in Nevis. Now, except for those two largest hotels on St. Kitts, the Marriott and the Park Hyatt, two of the top hotels in the Caribbean, I should add. Except for those two large hotels, they produce their own supply of water via the process of desalination. Now, what does the situation in St. Kitts looks like? And we can simply answer that question with a thorough examination of the actual water systems. And it is estimated that St. Kitts has a minimum groundwater reserve. And when I say groundwater reserve, I think of the potential safe yield. But we have a potential safe yield of 11 million gallons per day. Yes, 11 million gallons per day. To date, however, we have only developed 5 million gallons of this reserve, which is currently being extracted from some 25 wells around the island. And these wells are found in throughout the island. Like I said, we have wells that supply Bird Rock and Frigate Bay, West Central and Central Bastille, St. Peter's, Connery, and Lodge, Mansion, Tabernacle, Sadler, St. Paul's, Newton Ground, Sandy Point, Trinity, Deep Bay, Old Road, and as I said, all around the island, we do have, I think, in some 25 wells that provide this supply. Now, in terms of the surface water sources, my Straight Dog family, the Water Services Department also captures an average of 1.9 million gallons per day of potable water from 6 surface sources, or some people refer to them as springs. But the Water Services Department capture water from these 6 sources, which are in Wingfield, in Kearns, or Green Hill we call it, Franklands, Phillips, Stonefort, and Lodge. Now, the current average total production capacity within the system is approximately 6.9 million gallons per day. That's what we have in terms of our wells plus our surface sources. Now, whereas, very interesting, the average demand is about 6 million gallons per day. So we're just on edge, you can see, my Straight Dog family. It is important to note, though, that these surface sources, or these springs, are susceptible to drought and typically drop to as low as 40% of their supplies, their capacity, I should say, during the dry season. And right now we have the dry season. Hence, during the dry season, the 1.9 million gallons can be reduced to 1 million gallons. Why? It's dried, it's drought, no rain is falling, causing some areas then to experience less than a 24-hour supply, and that's what's happening in areas like Kearn, and that continues to experience water rationing. And my Straight Dog family, our groundwater supplies, our wells, are also susceptible, albeit not as susceptible or not as vulnerable as the surface sources, for obvious reasons. So, today, we need to enhance the value of water, which is under extreme threat from a growing population, increasing demands of agriculture and industry. And we in St. Kitts Nevis know too well about the worsening impacts of climate change. We have experienced climate change, and it has impacted us negatively in so many different ways and so many different areas. Did you know, my Straight Dog family, that today around the globe, today around the world, 1 in 3 persons live without safe drinking water? I repeat that. Did you know that around the world, 1 in 3 persons live without safe drinking water? And it is estimated that by the year 2050, up to 5.7 billion people could be living in areas where water is scarce for at least 1 day per month, or 1 month, I should say, per year. We experienced that some time back in 2015, I think it was. Jamaica was without water for about 5 days. Sangwang had no water for several days as well. And so that's nothing new. and it will get, prognosis suggests it would get worse as the years continue and the climate change and the climate variability would impact us most. Now, climate resilient water supply and sanitation could save the lives of more than 360,000 infants per year. And if we limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, it is predicted that we could cut climate-induced water stress by up to 50%. Hear that? If we limit global warming to 1.5% Celsius above pre-industrial levels, it is predicted that we could cut the climate-induced water stress by up to 50%. Now, my family, extreme weather has caused more than 90% of major disasters over the last decade. By 2040, global energy demand is projected to increase by over 25%, and water demand is expected to increase by more than 50%. And yes, we talk about limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And we, as a federation, as a nation, have already declared our national determined contribution, our NDC as it is called.
Today, the delegation message. The time for action is now. We are here at a time when the entire world is languishing from the horrors of climate change, including sea level rise, extreme weather events, and dramatic changes in rainfall patterns. We are here at a time when coastal towns and villages, and even entire islands, face destruction, at a time when lives and livelihoods are at stake, all undoubtedly attributed to human interference. Yet, enough action is not being taken to remedy the situation that worsens with every second that the clock ticks. We are at a crossroad where the science is explicit that to contain climate change to an acceptable level, we must limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The latest IPCC report indicates that we still have a chance, but must act now in order to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. Climate change is real, and St. Kitts and Nevis has launched during COP26 a more significantly ambitious revised nationally determined contribution NDC, proposing to reduce emissions by 61% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels.
Very ambitious national determined contribution, advanced there by former minister with responsibility for the environment, Minister Evelyn. But even before that eventuality, we are already facing climate-induced water stress. Since 2007, the government of the day was warned about global warming, and climate change, my straight dog family, since in 2007, the government of the day was warned about that particular fallout from global warming. Now, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, such as through variations in the solar cycle. But since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily through burning fossil fuels like coal oil and gas. In spite of all this available information, though, all this available information on water, sadly, many of us take water for granted, as opined by the incumbent water service engineer.
Well, necessity. And, I really think of after air, which we all know we have to breathe every second of our life, air. After that, I think of water. Water is necessary for sustaining life. And, it is unfortunate that very often that is taken for granted. But we are hoping that by opening channels.
Well, I believe it was intended to say by opening certain channels and options. And there's a very strange philosophy being practiced right now in terms of water, because with our reduction in rainfall, there's still a focus on well drilling, and water comes from rain. But I'll tell you more about that as we continue. But in recent times, I hasten to tell you that no new wells have been drilled on St. Kitts. However, just before the elections in 2015, a groundwater exploration and delivery agreement between the government of St. Kitts and Nevis and Bede, St. Kitts Limited, was arrived at with the intention, with the objective of developing a further 2 million gallons per day. And this agreement was signed on January the 8th in 2015. Now, 3 days after the said elections of 16th February 2015, a check in the amount of $750,000 and payable to Bede, St. Kitts Nevis Limited, was issued on February 19, 2015, purportedly to cover the costs of mobilization. Now, the project scope included all exploration, drilling, and capital works, including development and construction of production, treatment, and delivery facilities, and other operation and maintenance costs for the extraction of 2 million imperial gallons of potable water per day from aquifers to agreed points in the government's distribution or transmission system. Now, the contract sum back then of $4 million, or was $4 million, and was originally of 12 months duration. The terms of a 3-year maintenance contract in the sum of $400,000 per year, based on abstraction, which is part of the primary contract, is still to be finally negotiated. That's back then. It was envisaged, and it was never negotiated, I should add, but it was envisaged that if Bede was successful, this should provide an adequate supply of potable water for 10 years. Now, did Bede fulfill its obligations under its agreement dated March or January 2015? And that is a pertinent question we can ask. And we can provide the answer and say no. We can provide the answer and say no. Government, yet though, has taken the risk and have entered into another agreement with Bede. believe it or not, for the exploration, identified drilling, testing and developing water wells in, and of all places, the Green Valley in Keon. Yes, in spite of the experience with BEAD, government in 2020, under the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, entered into another contract with BEAD. BEAD, as I said, has never performed, but government has entered into another agreement with BEAD and signed by the then Minister with responsibility of public infrastructure, Sean Richards.
As a matter of fact, when I infrastructure, I took the opportunity to sign a contract. That contract in the first instance called for the correction of the water coming from a well in the Shadwell area referred to as Shadwell 2. The quality of the water there is compromised. And the second aspect of the contract called for the drilling of a well in Keon to identify an alternative source of water for the people of Keon. Unfortunately, it came at a time when COVID was very much with us. The company BEAD came in a first time and began doing some work relative to correcting the issues at Shadwell 2. Unfortunately, the company did not have the equipment required to get the corrections done to Shadwell 2. And so that frustrated the work. The company did leave. And it also was at a time when you came into the Federation, you had to do quarantine. And so the company had concerns about that also. The company eventually left with the intentions of coming back to complete the work with Shadwell 2 and also to do the drilling in the Keon area. My last conversation with BEAD just before I left office was that BEAD is supposed to be returning during the course of this month to begin drilling for a new well here in Keon to supply the people of Keon with water to bring this issue to an.
And yes, my Stray Dog family, believe it or not, another agreement has been entered with BEAD. And yes, I'm going to take your calls intermittently. If you feel like calling me at any time in the program, feel free to call. The numbers are 869-663-6672 or 646-829-6672. If I take your call, I just took that call and had that call on hold. Just hold for a couple of seconds until I make the point. But since I was making the point, though, about the Shadwell 2, there was an independent review of the works as required or as agreed contractually, and that independent review did in fact state, and I quote, that BEAD did not use state-of-the-art equipment in its exploration, drilling, testing, extraction, and delivery of potable water to the government of St. Kitts Nevis's delivery system, or the contract, I should say. The contract stipulated that BEAD shall use state-of-the-art equipment in its exploration, drilling, testing, extraction, and delivery of potable water to the government delivery system. Use ungrouted surface casing that cannot be sanitarily sealed from top to bottom, or rather BEAD use ungrouted surface casing that cannot be sanitarily sealed from top to bottom of the casing. They use substandard Chinese manufactured well screen that collapse. They installed coarsely grid number 8 slot well screen without gravel packing in formation with infilling sand. They installed the production screen without a bottom cap to seal the screen from sucking into sediments that settled to the bottom of the borehole. And that's no reason, that's obviously the reason why Shadwell 2 was declared unfit for purpose. Now, the government of the day, as I said, or rather the government only in December of 2020, as you've just heard, signed a contract for over $6 million. $6 million with BEAD to undertake well drilling remediation in the Cairn and Bastia areas. Mark you, after the experience with BEAD from its first contract, then Sean Richards, as minister with responsibility for water, decided in his own wisdom that he will enter into a contract with BEAD for $6 million. Yes, $6 million. Now, that was 1 year and 2 months ago. But Straight Talk can confirm that BEAD has not begun work on this new contract. Sad though, in the meantime, in Cairn is still being rationed on a nightly basis, just like Birdrock, just like Frigate Bay. Suffice to say, at this moment, however, that at the expense of time and $6 million, at the expense of time and $6 million, many more lessons would be learned. Many more lessons would be learned, my Straight Talk family. Many more lessons would be learned. And I'll take a little break here, perhaps, and take this call. Caller, you are live. Hello, caller? Yes, sir.
All right then, cool. How you been doing for the past months or a couple of years? Because the last time I still, it was last election when you was running, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so how you been doing some things?
I have been peaceful. What about you?
Well, remember I telling you last time I see it was election time when you was running, right?
Yes, that's some time ago.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you give me $150 food stamp. And I asked you for some money to deal with some bills and stuff, but you give me $150 food stamp.
Mm-hmm.
And from things you get back the result that you lose. Me never see you again. Patches me as I'll be hungry in a tongue. I mean, I see you. Because I come in election time, I see you, man. I'm going to be a politician. But I need to come around poor people often because we're going on with them and so in the ghetto.
Okay. Who is this?
Only when election time come up, people say, are you?
Who is speaking, may I ask?
Man, Patches, I need to come better on them kind of things. I achieve poor people to mistake, man. You understand?
So what? Yeah, but before you go, I don't believe that one should be given a handout. Perhaps instead of giving you a fish for the people to teach you how to fish, what do you do?
Well, I used to do some gardening work, but from things I used to work with Timothy there, but from things they turn with Timothy, you don't know me over sit down because they are victimize me because I make a shot.
Yeah, but if you do your garden, nobody can victimize you because you work on your own.
How do you mean they can't victimize me? They can't victimize me and they do it. And they do it.
How do they victimize you?
Patches, I want to work and we could talk in person. I want to work. So if you could help me with the work because last time I see you, I'm tell you one election, right? Again.
That's 2 years ago, right?
That's what I tell you. So okay. I'm going to see you again.
Okay, well, I'm off island, my brother, so whenever we connect, we'll talk again about that. But I prefer to teach you to fish than to give you a fish for a day, though.
That's true. That's true. I like how you're talking.
Okay. Well, thanks for your input.
All right.
All right. Cheers, my brother.
Good.
Yeah. Yes, my Straight Talk family will entertain our calls as we go along. But getting back to the discussion, though, right, about our water. And many lessons, as I said, would be learned from this latest agreement with BEAD. We will learn, for example, that BEAD seemed to be designed to extract money from the treasury instead of water from underground. And yes, we spoke about the reduced rainfall, but sea level rise has also impacted us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, in St. Kitts in particular, I can speak to. Because the projected global warming warming rate of sea level rise is constantly being revised upward as updated measurements of glacial recession in Greenland and the Antarctic accelerate. The projected sea level rise over the next 100 years may approach 1 to 1.15 meters, as suggested by some researchers. Now, this amount of sea level rise by itself can result in the necessity to abandon the existing Bastia Valley well field for higher ground inland. Believe it or not, as I mentioned before on this program, and I need to repeat it, there's this misperception about the Bastia Valley. In fact, the Bastia Valley expands some 5 miles from Olives Mountain in the west to Canada Hills in the northeast to Connery Hills in the east. The water comes all the way and percolates underground because we have a highly porous soil. I think we have what is called sandy loam soil, which is high in porosity. Now, the water comes all the way down and settles in the well field. There's a well field east of the Kim Collins Highway, going towards the Connery Hills in the east. And that's where the precious water lies. But as sea level rises, believe it or not, the higher the sea level, the greater the salt intrusion in the Bastia Valley well field. And there is a recommendation since 2007 to move the wells inland, northwards behind or towards the airport side. But this has not been done. And so far, and that is what's causing the rationing for the Bird Rock and Bastia and Prickly Bay area. But based on the data presented in the report, the threshold sea level for abandoning the Bastia Valley Aquifer well field is 0.4 meters, unless the water table declines and stabilizes. The current rate of water level decline in the well field may require abandonment of the well field within 5 or 7 years. And the reason one has to ration the water or the pumping from the area is because we have to ensure that we do not damage the well field. Now, the current rate of groundwater declines, my Straight Dog family. The current rate of groundwater declines should be considered an immediate threat. It should be considered an immediate threat to the long-term quality of the water in the Bastia area. Now, the report continued, and I quote, "This threat requires This threat requires immediate planning to develop a secondary water source. My family, this threat requires a secondary water source, either surface or groundwater. In terms of addressing the threat of climate change to the Caribbean, though, the cost of inaction is high. Projections indicate that losses could total US $22 billion annually by 2050. And that figure represents roughly 10% of the current Caribbean economy. I say that again. In terms of addressing the threat of climate change to the Caribbean, the cost of inaction could be high, very high, as projections indicate that losses could total $22 billion annually by the year 2050. And that figure represents roughly 10% of the Caribbean economy. In addition, climate change resources could help our region reduce its dependence on fossil fuels and exposure to price variability with gains for climate change mitigation. If you look at our rainfall patterns, my Straight Dog family, we have not in many years achieved the level of rainfall which I think a good year would put us to 60 inches of rainfall, which is an annual, a good year. I recall in 2015, it was the first time ever that we rationed water in St. Kitts, from my memory, and I inherited that as the minister. We had a rainfall deficit of some 50%. There were only 20 or 22 inches of rain that fell that particular year in 2015. And we have been struggling. We have been struggling with the drought and the low rainfall. Within the water systems in St. Kitts, it is anticipated, again, as I said, that there is a minimum groundwater reserve which has not been tapped to date. And we do as well capture potable water from the 6 surface sources or springs at Wingfield, Stonefort, Franklands, Keon Green Hill, Phillips's, and Lodge. Now, my Straight Dog family, it is important to note as well that during the dry season, these surfaces, like I said, are susceptible to drought, and their yield can drop to 40% during the dry season. Ironically, there is a desalination plant in Sandy Point, and we can't go there, and we'll address that as soon as they come back from this telephone call. Caller, you're live. And we'll address that. Hello, caller. Come back from this telephone call. Caller, you're live. Yes, caller, you're live. Hello, caller. Caller, you're listening to your equipment. Turn the equipment off. Listen to your telephone. Caller, you're listening to your equipment. Turn the equipment off. Listen to your telephone. Caller, you're listening to your equipment. Turn the equipment off. Listen to your telephone. Caller. Okay, that caller is listening to his telephone. Please listen to the telephone and not your equipment. Like I said, my Straight Dog family, ironically, the only option is desalination. And there's a desalination plant that has sat idly at the valley since 2006 or 2007. Yet the people in Sandy Point and Newton Ground are experiencing expanding demand in those areas. The people in Sandy Point and Newton Ground are experiencing expanding demands in those areas.
In 2017, the Old Road Bay was severed. You couldn't pass from one end to the next during the storm. So as a result of that, the government requested of Public Works to put the mechanism in place, give us a costing as to how much it will cost, give us a...
We have other areas of the island where demand is expanding, even in the Sandy Point, Newton Ground area. We are also starting to experience some challenges in that area. And were we to get any large development in those areas, it would definitely, probably exceed our capacity at the moment.
And yes, my family, we are expanding. There has been an increase in intensity as well of natural disasters as a result of climate change. Near 200-year cycle storms is what we are experiencing this time. Think of Dominica, think of Antigua and Barbuda, and think of other Caribbean islands. Think of even Hurricane Maria in St. Kitts and Nevis, which actually severed the Old Road Bay main road network, cut us off from that particular network. Remember that, my Stray Dog family?
A proposal as to what could be done so that this thing don't reoccur. And we actually engaged the services of a consulting firm out of Jamaica, ADEB Consultant, to assist us in the design. We came up with a number of designs and we actually put cost into them. We made a presentation to the cabinet and the cabinet agreed with the final one, which is ongoing there today. Now there were others we looked at, which the public asked question, why we didn't try this one, why we didn't try that one. But at the end of the day, the one which we have settled on is one which has a very low maintenance.
And my family, coastal erosion is also prevalent. Irish Town, Bay Road, Fort Thomas, New Guinea. These are areas in which we anticipate, and we should have already, in fact, we have designed revetment, and we should have already built resilience in those particular areas. We should have already built them, my Stray Dog family.
There's a project on the books which is slope stabilization in the Phillips area. That's one of the projects we intend to engage in this year. Sea defense work. We are having some challenge. The water is actually eroding in the Fortlands area, in New Guinea area, and Irish Town area. We are actually working with CDB to actually do some work in terms of the design and costing for those there. Those are some of the projects we are looking at in the future.
So yes, my Stray Dog family, climate scientists have been saying all along that one of the primary effects of climate change is the disruption of the water cycle. Since so much of everyday life and planning is determined by hydrological systems, It is important to understand the impact that climate change is having and will have on our drinking water supplies, sanitation, food, and energy production. The relationship between water, energy, agriculture, and climate change is very important, so too it is quite complex. Climate change and water are closely linked. Climate change has the potential to tilt out of balance the relatively stable climate in which civilization has been built and jeopardize the security of food, our energy systems, and water. We spoke already about the Bede Agreement. And my Straight Dog family, it is very interesting, a very interesting development. But one other opinion that is unavoidable to it, that is desalination. We have to consider the area of desalination, my Straight Dog family. That is an imperative.
I want to just mention desalination. Right now on the table for us here in St. Kitts as an option. Desalination, of course, is where you actually set up a plant usually close to the coastline, and you stick a pipe out in the ocean, you pull in the seawater, you run it through that plant, desalination plant, and out comes fresh potable water that you can drink, cook with, bathe with, etc. Marriott does it. I think Park Hyatt has one. The main thing with desalination, of course, is the cost. It uses a lot of electricity, and therefore it is costly. Mm-hmm. Typically, it would cost no less than about $25 per 1,000 gallons to desalinate water. Mm-hmm. Bear in mind that in St. Kitts right now, in your household, you're paying starting at $7.20 per 1,000 gallons. So this is what is confronting us. We don't have a water problem in St. Kitts, we have an economic problem, because the whole ocean is there. We could just desalinate. There is no shortage of water there, but it's the cost. Is the government going to pay a developer or investor who comes in and put down a desalination plant, is going to pay him $20 or more for 1,000 gallons and then distribute it to our houses for $7.20?
Well, that is the call of the government, because the government has to consider the supply and the demand. And if it means going to desalination, then go to desalination. I recall that in 2016 or 2017, we approached the Marriott Hotel, the owners of the Marriott and our operators, as we learned that the Marriott had an excess capacity of some 50,000 gallons which they can provide us per day. And this would have helped the residents in the Bird Rock, Frigate Bay and beyond, to help them to alleviate that water shortage. And what stood between putting that water online and eliminating the rationing in Bird Rock and Frigate Bay? The cost, $25 per gallon. But it is something. It is a, I believe strongly then, and I still believe strongly now, that we should have bite the bullet and put the water in the system rather than having everybody being rationed every night from 8 o'clock until 5 o'clock. at mornings. That has to be a decision, or that should have been a decision taken long ago. And it ought to be a decision that the incumbent should look at now. As long as Marriott still has that excess capacity, minister with responsibility for water, I guide you in that direction. Because what's true for business addressing climate change and its water impacts is just as true for all segments of society, from government agencies to water utilities, to farmers, to residential water users. Every sector must prepare for climate risk, especially as it relates to water. I do not know if it's too late to salvage that desalination plant that has lied idle in the valley in Sandy Point for nigh, I believe, 13 or 14 years. It may be too late to salvage that plant. But could you imagine a 2.5 million gallon plant lying idle in Sandy Point? I tried to relocate it to Bassett Hill, but my proposal was only approved on principle. And if you know what on principle means, you'll understand. The representative of Sandy Point and then Deputy Prime Minister said Sandy Point has no water problem. But the water problem in Bassett is everybody's problem, because it is the government's problem, because the government must provide that public good. It has that obligation. So we must build resilience in the water sector. If we don't, we will have to live without water on St. Kitts. And that's my story tonight, and I'm not going to change it. I believe that you will agree that water is life, and life without water in St. Kitts is unacceptable. My Straight Dog family, we do have our issues. Our issues are many. We looked at, as I said, the reverse osmosis or desalination plant that is sitting idly at La Valley for well over 10 years. At the time we looked at it, it was salvageable. I don't know what's the situation now. A potential site was identified in Bassett Hill to accommodate, I said 2.5 million gallons. I take that back. I believe it was 1.2 million gallons capacity. The cost of relocation was assessed, set up, including construction and drilling of nearshore wells. Also, the commissioning of the plant was also considered. We also envisaged a public-private partnership so as to ensure production of the water within 6 months, and that was way back as 2016, some 6 years ago. And we believe that the public-private partnership would have provided an upfront, it's an arrangement that would have provided upfront funding for this project and indemnify, and an indemnity rather for government against risk of bringing the plant online or into production, including ongoing maintenance. This was the proposal sent to the cabinet, and the cabinet agreed on principle. And this was in the face of the facts. The facts based on the Water Resource Management Plan of 2009, which was an outcome of the UNEP project entitled Rehabilitation and Management of the Bastia Valley as a Protection Measure for the Underlying Aquifer. And an excerpt from that report would read like this. There is a trend of declining static water, or rather there is a trend of declining static water levels observed in the Bastia well field. This decline is observed to range from 1.5 to 2 feet, according to the available data extending back into the 1970s. The decline in water levels appears to have accelerated from 1999 to 2009, with an increase in groundwater withdrawals. Continuing the watering of the aquifer will lead to increased areas of saltwater intrusion and declining potable water quality within the well field. 3 zones of saltwater intrusion have already been identified in the well field area by the NMER mapping. And this is what was presented to the government. So we knew from since 2007 that the Bastia Valley Aquifer well field that used to be pumped for over 30 years, it was pumped 24/7. And if it continued, then because of the sea level rise and the salt water intrusion, we would have run the risk of making the aquifer extinct, if I can use that word. But St. Kitts, as we speak, is facing an extended dry period characterized by record low rainfall. So the negligible recharge of aquifers and drastically reduced flows from surface intakes. That's the result. As I said before, this dates back to 2015, 7 years ago, when the records at the RLB International Meteorological Office indicated back then that our rainfall during that year was less than 50% of the average, and the forecast back then, we found the trend worsen. And climatologists link this weather pattern to climate change. The Water Services Department was forced to reduce abstraction by 55% from the Bastia Aquifer well field and other wells around the island due to the threat of saltwater intrusion, which could eventually render the wells unusable. So, what has happened? Demand control, water rationing right around the island, with surface interruptions between the hours of, in some cases, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and in other cases, 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. nightly. So what can we do about that? What should be done about that? Because the situation is untenable and can do irreparable damage to our productive sectors, such as agriculture and tourism in particular. Our health, education, and other sectors are being made vulnerable. to avoid a deeper crisis, we have to get new water into our system immediately. And that water can come from desalination. I submit, my family, that water must come from desalination. We cannot afford to procrastinate any longer. We cannot. We are living on the edge. And if we do not do something now, we will be living without water on St. Kitts. And that's how serious the situation is. Very, very serious. Water is a public good. And the government of the day, any government of the day, has an obligation to ensure that it is delivered to its people. Life without water anywhere is terrible. And if you have just joined me, we are looking at that caption, water or life without water on St. Kitts. And as I said before, I repeat for those who have just joined me, that life without water anywhere is terrible. In St. Kitts and Nevis, it's a situation, and I speak particularly for St. Kitts, it's a situation that we are not accustomed to. And we know it's a commodity that we cannot live without. We have never had water rationing before. Remember, we had standpipes all around the country. We go to a standpipe and the water was running. But my family, something has to be done. And something has to be done now. Because water makes life. And every drop of water cycles continuously through the air, the land, and sea, to be used by someone or something else downstream. I said 2/3 of the earth's surface is covered with water. In St. Kitts and Nevis, the entire federation is surrounded by water. Yet there is a scarcity of drinkable, potable, as we say, water around us. Something has to be done. Quite a lot has been said about water in St. Kitts. Many things that have been said are right, but some things are dead wrong. We talk about Keon, we talk about Bird Rock, we talk about Frigate Bay, my Stray Dog family. But something I'm appealing to the powers that be has to be done. We spoke about the aquifer. We spoke about construction on the aquifer. But the truth is, we just cannot separate the aquifer from our communities, because the entire Bastia, all the construction of buildings that populate Bastia, they all sit on the aquifer. But my focus tonight, as I consider water, I saw it, I see it, I should say, as a public good. And I suggest that those in authority must do everything to conserve it. All of us must combine and do everything to conserve it so as to ensure its sustainability. Look at our water, our drinking water in St. Kitts. Where does it come from? In most cases, our drinking water, in all cases, come from surface water or groundwater. Except for those two large hotels, Marriott and Park Hyatt, as I said, their water come from desalination. But the situation in St. Kitts, as it refers to water, is not encouraging. We must do something about our water systems. It is estimated, as I said before, that St. Kitts has a minimum groundwater reserve. It has a potential safe yield of some 11 million gallons per day. But to date, we have only developed 5 million gallons. This reserve, which is currently being abstracted from 25 wells around the island, we have to get back, examine seriously our approach, but with the existing situation of climate variability that has derived reduced rainfall, then we must look at our options. We must look at our options, my straight dog family, because our groundwater supplies are vulnerable. So too is our surface supplies. So today we need to enhance the value of water, which is under extreme threat from a growing population as well, increasing demands of agriculture and industry, including tourism. And we in St. Kitts and Nevis, we know too well about the worsening impacts of climate change. It bears repeating that 1 in 3 persons live without safe drinking water. It is estimated that by 2050, up to 5.7 billion people could be living in areas where water is scarce for at least 1 month a year. Do we want to be put in that category? Climate resilient water supply and sanitation could save the lives of more than 360,000 infants every year. We have not been put in that category, but we have to guard against it, my people. Extreme weather has caused more than 90% of major disasters over the last decade. By 2040, it is projected that global energy demand will increase by over 25%, and water demand will increase by more than 50%. And yes, we have declared our national determined contribution. We have made our statement in relation to climate change, our climate action, in terms of our own position in St. Kitts and Nevis. But even before that eventuality, we are already facing climate-induced water stress. We have been warned about global warming. We have been warned about global warming. Climate change, my family, refers to the long shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. And these shifts may be natural, such as through variations in solar cycle. And we can reflect, because since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. But in spite of all this available information, sadly, many of us take water for granted. We have gone into agreements And I must say that the government of the last administration in 2020 signed a $6 million agreement with Bede to undertake well drilling and undertake remediation in the Keon area in particular. Keon has been water deficient from time immemorial. Look back. Every single representative going back to Clarence Fitzroy Brand promised Keon water. Morris did. Cedric Liburd did. Eugene Hamilton did. So something has to be different about Keon. My dear friend Enver called me some weeks ago, and I put my neck on a block that Bede won't find one drop of water in Keon. Bede are not concerned about extracting water. They seem to be concerned about extracting money from our treasury. And I say so without fear of contradiction. Because that was 1 year and 2 months ago, in 2020, since Bede signed that contract. Have they begun work on this contract? No, I'm told. Over a year. But sad though, in the meantime, Keon, like other communities, is still being rationed on a nightly basis. And I beg those in authority now, please, let's look to the alternative of desalination. Our entire island is surrounded by seawater. Come on, let's use it. We cannot exhaust it. Stop depending on these fly-by-night companies that come and promise us the world, promise us so much water. They promised us that water since 2015, Bede did. Bede promised us to find water beyond 400 feet from the Earth's surface. They found water at 300 feet. Shadwell 1. If you ask me how, I will tell you one day. But Shadwell 2 has not been commissioned. So I'm asking the minister responsible for water to be cautious. Review that Bede project and review it carefully, because they have not located any deep aquifers that are sufficiently wide to produce sustainable water supplies since 2015. There's a report written by the former manager and water engineer, Dennis Paul, and he made this comment in his report, interestingly, and I quote, this was the final conclusion of Dennis Paul, and I quote, we need to make provisions for Bede not delivering in late 2015 as originally planned. I wonder how much they have delivered since. In that contract, section 6.3, it read, the government of St. Kitts shall grant Bede fully paid, irrevocable, during the terms of this agreement, assignable per terms hereof, exclusive license to drill, develop, and make available for delivery and deliver to the government distribution system groundwater located in bedrock aquifers not less than 400 feet below ground level during the term of this agreement and including any extended term. Government deserve the right to drill and to construct for drilling at shallow aquifers of not more than 400 feet at ground level. Now, Bede found water at 300 feet below land surface. And what has happened? They found 2 wells. But it is also found that the quality of one of those wells, Shadwell 2, could not be brought online. Some 350,000 gallons per day. Reason being, Section 3, subsection 9.2 spoke to the obligation of Bede. And it read, or it reads, Bede shall use state-of-the-art equipment in its exploration, drilling, testing, extraction, and delivery of potable water to the government delivery system. But Bede used, according to this report, ungrouted surface casing that cannot be sanitarily sealed from top to bottom of the casing. They use substandard Chinese manufactured well screen that collapse. They installed costly grid number 80 slot well screen without gravel packing in formation with infilling sand. They installed the production screen without the bottom cap to seal the screen from sucking in sediments that settle to the bottom of the borehole. And this is a report that was delivered in 2016. No wonder Shadwell 2 still cannot come online. My stray dog family, this water business is serious business, and we have to look at it seriously. We have to look at it, my stray dog family, because we continue to face, as a country, and the water services as a department, has been facing operational challenges resulting from dry periods with high rainfall deficits, up to 50% rainfall deficit at times. There are monthly variations. Reduced inflows from surface water resources has been the result. Little or no recharge to our aquifers have resulted. Early signs of salination or salinization of our aquifers. Level of pumping from wells are now at 40% capacity. Island-wide water demand control, rationing, water rationing had to be introduced. There has been service interruptions to homes and businesses, while some of our food crops wilter or are wilting in the fields. It has been difficult, my people, very difficult for the water sector in St. Kitts, and the prognosis is not looking well, as I said before. My straight dog family, the reality of the situation on the ground. We continue to face extended dry periods characterized by record low rainfall, negligible recharge of aquifers, and drastically reduced inflows from surface water intakes. We have been forced to reduce abstraction by some 55% at times from the Bastia Valley Aquifer well field and other wells around the island. Because, like I said before, because of the threat of salt water intrusion, which would render these wells unusable. This situation is untenable and can do irreparable damage to our productive sectors, to our agriculture and tourism in particular. Our health, education, and other sectors are also vulnerable. To avoid a deeper crisis, my people, we have to get new water into our system, lest we'll be living without water on St. Kitts and Nevis. New water has to be introduced into the system. That water can come and ought to come from desalination. My Stray Dog family, we have to put it right. All water comes from rain. If all water comes from rain and there's a rainfall deficit, drought, why is the thought about drilling more wells a good one? Isn't that at variance with the exact situation?
All of the water that we use in St. in every day, it doesn't rain every week, it doesn't rain the same amount every time. In St. Kitts we have a wet season and a dry season. We have less rainfall, therefore we have less water available. Persons need to take stock. Dry season we have less water available than say in the latter half of the year. We need to always remember that. All of the water that we use in St. Kitts comes from rain. It doesn't rain every day. It doesn't rain every week. It doesn't rain the same amount every time. In St. Kitts we have a wet season and a dry season. We have less rainfall, therefore we have less water available. Persons need to take stock. Dry season we have less water available than say in the latter half of the year. We need to always remember that. From the government standpoint, the government will always see it as its responsibility to ensure that we endeavor to meet the demand for water, potable water, for purposes mainly inside of the home. We have been trying our best to keep up with the demand. I think that unfortunately when we look at the situation locally in St. Kitts, we are not in the position that we would like to be in terms of the amount of water that we have, the supply versus the demand.
And I submit that we are not in that position because we have this one-track idea of drilling wells to find water that comes from rain. When we have an ocean, or we have a federation that's surrounded by the ocean. So let's go desalination. Let's go desalination. Make that recommendation strongly. I beg you, Mr. Water Engineer. It's not your problem. Make the recommendation and the authorities that be will determine how they'll find the money. It's not in your position to say it's too expensive. No.
Is right now on the table for us here in St. Kitts. as an option. Desalination, of course, is where you actually set up a plant usually close to the coastline, and you stick a pipe out in the ocean, you pull in the seawater, you run it through that plant, desalination plant, and out comes fresh potable water that you can drink, cook with, bathe with, etc. Marriott does it. I think Park Hyatt has one. The main thing with desalination, of course, is the cost. It uses a lot of electricity, and therefore it is costly. Typically, it would cost no less than about $25 per 1,000 gallons to desalinate water. Bear in mind that in St. Kitts right now, in your household, you're paying starting at $7.20 per 1,000 gallons. So this is what is confronting us. We don't have a water problem in St. Kitts, we have an economic problem, because the whole ocean is there. We could just desalinate. There is no shortage of water there, but it's the cost. Is the government going to pay a developer or investor who comes in and put down a desalination plant, is going to pay him $20 or more for 1,000 gallons and then distribute it to our houses for $7.20? To just mention desalination as one of the options that is right now on the table for us here in St. Kitts as an option. Desalination, of course, is where you actually set up a plant usually close to the coastline, and you stick a pipe out in the ocean, you pull in the seawater, you run it through that plant, desalination plant, and out comes fresh potable water that you can drink, cook with, bathe with, etc. Marriott does it. I think Park Hyatt has one. The main thing with desalination, of course, is the cost. It uses a lot of electricity, and therefore it is costly. Typically, it would cost no less than about $25 per 1,000 gallons to desalinate water. Bear in mind that in St. Kitts right now, in your household, you're paying starting at $7.20 per 1,000 gallons. So this is what is confronting us. We don't have a water problem in St. Kitts, we have an economic problem, because the whole ocean is there. We could just desalinate. There is no shortage of water there, but it's the cost. Is the government going to pay a developer or investor who comes in and put down a desalination plant, is going to pay him $20 or more for 1,000 gallons and then distribute it to our houses for $7.20?
Well, that's not your call, Mr. Water Engineer. That has to be the call of the Cabinet. Just tell the Cabinet what is required. The Cabinet will determine whether it would embark upon that program. Because Cairn wants water. East Bastia wants water. Other areas in the country not want, needs water. So you need to ensure how, where, when we can identify the areas and the partners that would lead us to desalination. And as I said before, I believe it should be investigated further, as it was investigated before, that the Marriott Hotel had excess capacity at their desalination plant. As a matter of fact, some years ago, we entered into discussions with the Marriott, and they had agreed to provide some 50,000 gallons per day. That would have helped to solve the problem in the Bird Rock and Frigate Bay area. The proposal was taken to Cabinet, and the Cabinet agreed in principle. And that's an easy thing to do, agree in principle. That does not bring the money, and that did not bring the solution as well to the problem of scarcity in the water supply because of the threats to the Bastille Valley Aquifer well field. I was taken aback that Bird Rock, Frigate Bay, and beyond still have that problem. As a matter of fact, I told you at the beginning, for those of you who may have joined me late, that a few months ago, I got caught by surprise as well. I came home at about 8 o'clock, just thereafter, and I turned my tap on to get a shower, and not one drop of water was there. We have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond that. And we have to ensure that this public good is delivered. Whoever has the responsibility, they must take it up and take it up expeditiously. Because water is life. And life without water on St. Kitts would be terrible. There should be no reason that we don't have water. And I'm saying this as a former minister with responsibility for water. I tried. And yes, we understood. Because we were taken by surprise in 2015 when we had a 55% rainfall deficit. And we knew about the threats to the salt intrusion in the Bastille Valley Aquifer, our wellfield area. We knew that that area has been pumped 24/7 for over 30 years. We knew of the increase or rising sea level, and we knew that it would affect production within the Bastille Valley wellfield area. Because I read before, and I'll read it before we wrap tonight, an excerpt from the report, the Water Resource Management Plan dated 2009, Volume 1, which is an outcome of the United Nations Environmental Program project entitled Rehabilitation and Management of the Bastille Valley as a Protection Measure for the Underlying Aquifer. And the excerpt reads, since 2009, the government of the day was forewarned that there is a trend of declining static water levels observed in the Bastille wellfield. This decline is observed to range from 1.5 to 2 plus feet, according to available data extending back into the 1970s. The decline in water level appears to have accelerated from 1999 to 2009, with an increase in groundwater withdrawals. Continued dewatering of the aquifer will lead to increased areas of salt water intrusion and declining potable water quality within the wellfield. 3 zones of salt water intrusion have already been identified in the wellfield area by the MER mapping. That's the multi-electrode electricity resistivity mapping that can tell us with accuracy what happens even up or beyond 400 feet below the land or Earth's surface. So we knew the information is there. The residential areas increased in East Bassettiere. the population increased. So obviously demand will have also increased. The amount of water available for public consumption has not increased, however, during the past 15 years. But, my Straight Dog family, something has to be done. Government, in the best interests, should consider reverse osmosis or desalination. As I said, it was sad that a plant lied idle at the Valley was never used to help to mitigate the existing water shortage resulting from low aquifer levels through increased demand. We identified a site to relocate that plant, but that never materialized. The cost of relocation, setup, including construction and drilling of the nearshore wells, also commissioning, we thought could have been undertaken by the private sector or a private sector partner, so as to ensure production of water within 6 months, but that too never materialized. Well, that's history. Where do we go from here? The time now is to focus now on the economics. Go past the politics. Let us look at water, look at the public good, electricity, we'll address at some times, housing as well. But life without water anywhere is terrible. So too, it must be terrible in St. Kitts. Furthermore, it's a situation that we are unaccustomed to. And water is a commodity that we cannot live without. Water makes life, and every drop cycles continuously through air, land and sea to be used by someone or something downstream. 2/3 of the earth's surface is covered with water. In St. Kitts and Nevis, the entire federation is surrounded by water. So why should there be a scarcity of water in St. Kitts? And quite a lot has been said about it. Many things are right, but some things are dead wrong. And the more things are repeated and go unchallenged, the quicker some people believe or tend to believe what is said. So we have to address the issue. We have to address the issue frontally. As we focus tonight on what I consider as a public good, water, we must do everything to conserve it so as to ensure its sustainability. Our drinking water in St. Kitts comes from the surface source or groundwater sources. And we must find a way to adapt to the existing situation in St. Kitts in particular. And I say St. Kitts because I do not know much about the situation on Nevis. And we can simply ask the question, what does the situation in St. Kitts look like? And we can simply answer that question after thorough examination of the actual water systems. We can say it's not looking good. And we cannot live without water on St. Kitts. As we wind down, I remind you that the current average total production capacity within the system is approximately 6.9 million gallons per day. If we combine the well and the surface sources, the average demand is near that though. So it's important to note as well that these two sources are vulnerable. They are susceptible to drought, and they can and they do typically drop to as low as 40% during the dry season. Reason for rationing. Hence, during the dry season, the 1.9 million gallons that come from the surface sources can be reduced to less than 1 million gallons per day. And this is what causes some areas to experience less than 24-hour supply. And that's what's happening in areas like Keon that continues to experience water rationing. Our groundwater supplies, our wells, are also susceptible, albeit not as susceptible, not as vulnerable, I should say, as the surface sources. But we need to enhance the value of water in our federation, in our St. Kitts and Nevis, because it's under extreme threat, as well from a growing population, increasing demands of agriculture, tourism, and industry. And we in St. Kitts and Nevis know too well about the increasing or the worsening impacts of climate change. To remind you as we wind down tonight's programming, that 1 in 3 persons live without safe drinking water around the globe. It is also estimated that by 2050, up to 5.7 billion people could be living in areas where water is scarce for at least 1 month a year. Climate resilient water supply and sanitation could save the lives of more than 360,000 infants every year around the globe. But if we limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, it is predicted that we could cut climate-induced water stress up to 50%. We don't contribute to the global warming, but the impact, the negative impact upon us is felt severely. Our economies could be wiped out in minutes. You see what's happening with some countries, some areas, where we have some 10 and 15 inches of rainfall in 2 hours. We see what has happened in our countries, even in our own country, where we experienced the near 200-year cycle storms that damage our coast. Remember what happened to Old Road Bay. Remember what happened to our roofs that disappeared as a result of storm. extreme weather has caused more than 90% of major disasters over the last decade. And yes, we have spoken about limiting global warming to 1.5% above pre-industrial levels. We have stipulated our own national determining contribution. But what can that do? What can it do realistically, my straight dog family?
Simple message. The time for action is now. We are here at a time when the entire world is languishing from the horrors of climate change, including sea level rise, extreme weather events, and dramatic changes in rainfall patterns. We are here at a time when coastal towns and villages, and even entire islands, face destruction. At a time when lives and livelihoods are at stake, all undoubtedly attributed to human interference. Yet, enough action is not being taken to remedy the situation that worsens with every second that the clock ticks. We are at a crossroad where the science is explicit that to contain climate change to an acceptable level, we must limit global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The latest IPCC report indicates that we still have a chance, but must act now in order to reach net zero emissions by mid-century. Climate change is real, and St. Kitts and Nevis has launched during COP26 a more significantly ambitious revised nationally determined contribution NDC, proposing to reduce emissions by 61% by 2030 compared to 2010 levels.
Ambitious. And even before that eventuality, we are already facing climate-induced water stress. Dry weather pattern continues throughout the island and has negatively impacted on our water supplies, thus causing reduced inflows from surface water resources, little or no recharge to our aquifers, early signs of salinization of aquifers. The level of pumping from our wells have now been reduced to 40% capacity. Island-wide water demand control, or a water rationing program, has been introduced island-wide. There's been service interruptions to homes and businesses, and in some cases our food crop have been negatively impacted. My stray dog family, in spite of all this available information on water, sadly, many of us take water for granted. Government, meanwhile, have taken the risk and entered into another agreement with BEAD for exploration for the identifying, drilling, testing and developing water wells in, and of all places, the Green Valley in Cairn. My stray dog family, as we wind down, the threshold is high. The current rate of groundwater level declines should be considered an immediate threat to the long-term water quality of the Bastia Valley aquifer. This threat requires immediate planning to develop a secondary source, a secondary water source, either surface or groundwater. It has to come from desalination. It must come from desalination. Because my Straight Talk family, even though, ironically, we had a desalination plant that sat idly at La Valley since 2006. Yet the people of Sandy Point and Newton Ground are experiencing expanding demand in those areas. But my people, something has to be done. The relationship between water, energy, agriculture, and climate change is very important. So too is quite complex. Climate change and water are closely linked, my Straight Talk family. As we wind down, the only development that's unavoidable has to be desalination. Because what's true for business addressing climate change and its water impacts is just as true for all segments of society, from government agencies to water utilities, to farmers, to residential water users. Every sector must prepare for climate risk, especially as it relates to water. So we must build resilience in the water sector. If we don't, we'll all have to live without water on St. Kitts. That's my story for tonight, my Straight Talk family, and I'm not going to change it. I won't change it. My time is done, and I'm going to run. I want to thank you for your tolerance tonight, for your patience, for your understanding, and for your participation. And I forgot to check my email, but forgive me for that. But I want to thank all who listen. I want to thank those on social media, Facebook and YouTube in particular. We will sort out the radio feed for some of those who don't have access to social media. And I empathize with you, and I'll do everything within my capacity to try to sort that out. But until we connect on Monday for another edition of Straight Talk, I want to thank God for guiding our discussion tonight. I want to thank all of you who just listened. Remember, you are the ones who make Straight Talk, and for that reason, I say a big, big thank you. I'm Ian Patrick Liburd, and God's will, we will connect on Monday for another edition of Straight Talk. Until that time, be good to yourselves and to all whom you meet. And remember that whatever your mind conceive, that you will achieve. But first of all, you've got to believe. So when you wake in the morning, thank God for the morning light. Thank Him for taking you through the night. And my Straight Talk family, keep moving on. Bye-bye until we connect on Monday.